In June of 2023, a group of hikers started hiking up Mount Baldy, which is a very popular and truly underestimated mountain in Southern California, only 40 miles outside of Los Angeles. The mountain is 10,000 feet in height, or a little over 3,000 meters. The hikers entered a place called Goode Canyon, which many hikers avoid because it is known as an unsafe area of the mountain. The hikers were aware that Julian Sands, a famous actor, had disappeared there 6 months previously during a winter hike of what's called the Baldy Bowl Trail. It was the same general area that they were hiking, and they were familiar with the area where his telephone last pinged. One of the hikers in the group is reported to have said that she had an ominous feeling or foreshadowing that they might encounter a dead body that day. It was a thought that was stuck in the back of her mind, and she was quoted to have said, "I couldn't quite shake the chilling thought, I hope we don't find a dead body today." As it would turn out, 3.5 hours later, one of the hikers in the group would see a boot in the bushes, and then shortly after, another boot, and then some human bones were found, and then they found a wallet with a driver's license in it. Their discovery made national news because the driver's license was that of none other than the famous actor Julian Sands. Today I'm going to take a look at the unfortunate death of Julian Sands, who played countless roles in film, in television, and on stage. And I want you to understand that I'm not trying to analyze the mistakes that might have been made or make any diagnosis of the individual. I'm merely speculating on the events that took place in hopes that anyone who sees this video might avoid certain circumstances themselves and save their own lives. At the end of the video, I'm going to share a quote from Julian Sands that I read when researching this video about his reasons for mountain climbing. He was an experienced mountaineer and had gone hiking and climbing all over the world. And this quote hints to me at the question asked of all mountaineers: why do you do it? That quote by Julian Sands, a very powerful one, will be coming up at the end of this video. Now, there are a lot of videos out there about Julian Sands and his disappearance. So why am I doing one on Everest mystery? A friend of mine reached out after we were discussing this disappearance of Julian Sands, and he said he watched another very popular video about the disappearance. This friend of mine is in search and rescue, he's in the medical field, and he said at the end of the video he was actually angry because there was nothing at the end that would say, hey, in order to avoid certain circumstances yourself, thus possibly saving your own life, here are a few things that I suggest. And so I decided that I'd do this video. We'll break down the story about what happened or what we think might have happened to Julian Sands, and then we'll offer some thoughts on how to prevent that if you or a friend is planning a hike. So in this video, first I'm going to talk about the extreme conditions that Mount Baldy is known for, particularly in winter. Then I'll take a look at the background of the story itself, as well as the search efforts that took place, and then I'll review information and reports about the discovery of his remains and some of the reporting that tried to determine what led to his death. And lastly, I'll share some ideas on the mistakes or miscues that might have been made during his hike of Mount Baldy, and how to prevent situations like this yourself if you're considering hikes similar to this. So before we get there, very quickly, please smash that subscribe button and hit the bell so you'll be notified whenever a video comes out on Everest Mystery. And also consider becoming a member of this channel for just 99 cents at the entry level. You can support the work that I do on Everest Mystery so I can put out more videos that look into accidents like this. These videos I look to inspire and give you thought-provoking videos that make your life just a little bit better. Mount Baldy, it's a mountain in the San Gabriel Mountains of Southern California. Its actual name is Mount San Antonio. It's on the border of Los Angeles and San Bernardino counties of California, and it's often snow-capped. And the peak and a subsidiary peak to the west form a double summit. The treacherous but familiar nature of Mount Baldy attracts experienced and unprepared hikers primarily because of its proximity to Los Angeles. The mountain is often underestimated. Just in the last month alone, there have been 14 calls for rescues on the mountain and numerous deaths as well. As I said, the mountain's proximity to an urban area with millions of people is thought to provide visitors a false sense of security, which makes Mount Baldy, not unlike Mount Washington in the northeast of the United States, one of the nation's deadliest peaks. And only 3 days before recording this video, a woman lost her life in there after being caught in a winter storm. And then only a day after that, 6 climbers were stranded and had to be helivaced off of the summit of Mount Baldy in extreme winter conditions. Back in 2020, the United States Forest Service urged legislators to actually restrict access to the mountain because there are so many people dying or needing rescues there. On the morning of January 23rd of 2023, Julian Sands began hiking up the Baldy Bowl Trail. But by 7:30 p.m. that night, he had not returned home. His family grew very concerned, and so they called to report him missing. The initial search was hampered by severe storms that occurred shortly after Sands went missing. His car was located on the 18th of January, and then the following day, it was reported that Sands' 3 adult children had also joined the ground search for their father. His son Henry, along with an experienced climber, was retracing the route his father is believed to have taken. According to reports, Sands' mobile phone had last tracked from a ping on the 15th of January, suggesting that at that time it ran out of power. The weather was so bad that they actually pulled the volunteers and searchers from the mountain. It was reported that the hiker was Julian Sands, and he was known to be an experienced mountaineer, said to have Makalu in Nepal on his bucket list, and he also had hiked and climbed Mount Baldy reportedly somewhere around the vicinity of 200 times. So he certainly had a lot of hiking and climbing experience and was familiar with the winter conditions on the mountain. Sands was 65 years old at the time, lived in North Hollywood, California. He was born in England, best known for his role in the film A Room with a View, which regularly makes lists as one of the best British films of all time. He also appeared in dozens of other films and television shows like Arachnophobia, Naked Lunch, Warlock, and Ocean's 13. At the time of his disappearance, it's believed that Sands was traversing what's known as the Baldy Bowl Trail. On hiking websites, the trail is described as challenging and strenuous. It goes up 3,900 feet or 1,200 meters over 4.5 miles or 7+ kilometers to the summit. The thing about after he disappeared, though, is it continued to snow and storm for days following, so any possibility of seeing him from a drone or a helicopter was hampered to almost an impossibility. As it would turn out, there was another man, Bob Gregory, missing on the mountain, and in the previous month there had been 14 different rescue operations. And then Sands' disappearance also came days after a woman, Crystal Paula Gonzalez Landis, who was known as the Dancing Hiking Queen, a joy to the community. She slid to her death very close to where Sands was, only wearing micro spikes on her shoes. Search crews continued combing the area, looking for Mr. Sands for months. This lingered into June. In an update on the search for Julian Sands, the Sheriff's Department said that as late as June 17th, there was still too much snow and it was still far too dangerous to continue searching in certain areas where they believe Sands might have landed or ended up. They used the words extreme alpine conditions, including steep terrain and ravines covered in more than 10 feet of snow. So Mount Baldy is obviously nothing to shake a stick at. In the 6 months leading up to the day that the hikers discovered Julian Sands, there had been 8 separate searches for Julian Sands. Authorities said that it was a total of 500 hours of searching that had been done. At the same time, 8 other unrelated search and rescue operations had been conducted in the region. And then on June 24th, 2023, as stated in the beginning of this video, a group of hikers started hiking Mount Baldy and entered a place called Goode Canyon. Most hikers avoid this canyon because it's not the safest place to be on the mountain. They were aware that Julian Sands had disappeared in this general vicinity, and they were very familiar with the area where his cell phone had last pinged 6 months previously. And that's where we come to the hiker in the group who is said to have had a strangely unique fear in the back of her head saying, quote, "I couldn't quite shake this chilling thought. I hope we don't find a dead body today." Now, I have to tell you, I have had this feeling before. Sometimes I think it's just a passing thing where, wow, how weird it would be if we encountered a dead body today. But about 10 years ago, on one of my training runs up a mountain called Hurricane Mountain, I was well up the mountain when I had this overwhelming sense that there was a dead body somewhere to the right of me as I was heading up this trail. It was truly more than I could bear, so I cut into the woods and started running through and slightly downhill in the direction that I believed this body would be. I searched for quite some time and then realized, gosh, you're really demented, man. Like, turn around and go finish your training run, which I did. When I got home 2 hours later, I heard on the news that only a mile and a half down through the woods, in the parking lot of a ski area right near where I lived, there was an automobile that was found running, and in the back seat was a little baby alive, clipped into the baby's seat. As it would turn out, in the pond that feeds the snowmakers at this mountain, they found the body of this woman. So next time I have that morbid feeling that maybe I'm going to encounter a dead body, I'm not going to doubt it. Back to the hikers. They continued their hike as usual, having to fan out to find the best path to the top because there was still a lot of falling stones that had landed on the trail, scraggly brush and things like that. When 3.5 hours into the hike, one of the hikers found a boot. And then shortly after that, they found another boot. They also morbidly found human bones, and that's when they came upon the wallet. 3 days later, it was confirmed absolutely that the bones and the human remains that they found were indeed those of Julian Sands. The New York Times reported in an obit of Julian Sands that he had reportedly climbed or hiked Mount Baldy 200 times, including numerous times in the winter. He even said that the winter conditions made things more interesting. The New York Times also said that he had hiked and climbed extensively in the Alps and in the Andes of South America, where in 1990 he had nearly lost his life and was quoted saying that in the Andes he was caught in a horrendous storm at altitude with 3 others, where others close to them perished. "We were lucky," he said of the incident. It's hard to say if Sands was aware of the conditions, the weather conditions that were about to hit Mount Baldy on the day that he set out to do his hike, but it is known that he was not carrying the equipment that one might want to have during this hike. On one of the boots that they found was a micro spike, which do have short half-inch or so metal spikes on the bottom, but they're certainly not sturdy enough to really withstand severe winter mountain conditions and situations. Because of the nature of the terrain, there's not really an established route on it because there's large boulders, a lot of scraggly brush, falling stones that rest. So it's probably done primarily because it's a short route directly up toward the summit, but it sounds like a grueling hike. But up they went anyway, traversing over dirt and scrambling over giant boulders. And so when they found Julian Sands 3.5 hours into the hike, they were all fanned out trying to find the best route and an actual established trail to go up through to the summit. So essentially, the mystery of what had happened to Julian Sands was half solved. At least they knew where he was when he fell or when he died. But what really happened to him remains unanswered to this day. It's not really known. But one of the interesting things is to note that he did not, at least with his remains, have an ice axe or a helmet or full crampons on his boots. So it's very possible that he was hiking along the ridge, and when bad weather came in, he might have gotten disoriented, taken off the regular trail that he was on, and slipped at the top of the Goode Canyon trail, and possibly then falling hundreds of feet or more below, bumping his head, maybe dying in the process, or what's worse, the possibility of him laying there and struggling. One of the other things that they noted is that he did not have with him a GPS unit, which can send pings via satellite and call for emergencies in the most remote parts of the world. And to me, that might have made a big difference had he had the ability to send an emergency call through what's known as an in-reach satellite device, like the one that I'm showing on the camera right now. There are also a lot of unanswered questions, and the cause of his death can never be determined because they only found some of the bones and there wasn't enough of a body, if you will, to make a determination or to do an autopsy, which leads some to speculate in the post-mortem, if you will, that perhaps animals found it and dragged different pieces in different directions, and therefore the remains of Julian Sands are probably no longer. But the question is, how did he end up in Goode Canyon in the first place after he was hiking the Baldy Bowl Trail, which doesn't even enter the canyon in which they found him? We'll never know exactly what happened, but the weather that came in that day is a very good indicator, and as we've seen from many other mountain stories where highly experienced mountaineers lose their lives, sometimes the weather creates such disorienting results by low visibility or cold or high winds that you can be even just a few degrees off of your mark and go way off trail. In the report that I did recently about Christopher Roma in the White Mountains, who lost his life on a big hike during the winter, one of the hikers who reported back to me said he couldn't even see to his outstretched hand. So if that was the case with Julian Sands, he might not have even known if he was right near the edge of a cliff about to fall. So therefore, there's a possibility that he wouldn't even know he needed crampons at the time. So as I said a little bit earlier, there were microspikes strapped to one of Julian Sands' boots. And a microspike essentially is a piece of gear really good for mild winter conditions and trails that are not very steep, but they certainly wouldn't have been sufficient for the conditions on Mount Baldy in January of 2023. The fact that he had been up the mountain so many times before might have given him some sense of complacency that everything was fine. He'd done it so many times. I know I'm not going to need crampons up there. I'll just go without. I totally get it. I'm not a finger pointer here because I'm the most guilty ever of being the last one to put on a pair of microspikes, and then sometimes even being the last one to switch from microspikes to crampons. But that's always always when I'm with someone. And that's probably the biggest point that can be made about this situation. Just like the one with Christopher Roma in the White Mountains of New Hampshire, he was alone. So when he got into trouble, there was nobody there to help him, or before he got into trouble, there was nobody there to say, hey, what do you think about turning back or huddling down for a short way before we go any further, just to make sure we're making all the right decisions. So there we are again with that situation where solo hikers are the most likely ones to be in need of a rescue and most likely the ones who disappear. So the fact that he had microspikes, no crampons, no ice axe, or a helmet, I get the no helmet thing, but then again, if he's going to be going down a steep ravine where he knows that there are rocks that occasionally fall, then a helmet is an absolutely mandatory piece of equipment to have on there. So the possibility exists that he overestimated his abilities and underestimated the terrain and the conditions, possibly because of his level of experience. Who knows, maybe a really inexperienced hiker would have just called it a day and not gone out. That said, just 2 days ago, before recording this, there was a woman who lost her life in extreme conditions. One thing to note, though, it's really important to say, is that there was no backpack found. So we don't know if perhaps there was a helmet or a backpack or crampons in it. So this certainly isn't an indictment of him. It's just saying that when he was found and among his remains, there were none of those pieces of equipment that would have been necessary in such a situation. For anyone who looks at a mountain trip like this and says, no way, I would never go, I get it. But there are a lot of people who look at a mountain like Mount Baldy or Mount Washington here in New Hampshire and say, that's the kind of mountain I'd love to be able to climb. So one of the things that I would strongly advise doing is look for a local guiding company that can bring you up there with an experienced guide. She or he will help you out with all the equipment that you'll need. And one of the great things about renting or hiring a guide for a day is you can rent the equipment, the crampons, the boots, the ice axe, even the down jackets if you need a down jacket, a helmet, goggles, you name it. So you don't have to make this gigantic investment, and you can go with somebody and get a feel for the mountain, get a feel for, is this something that I really love to do? Believe me, you're going to know pretty fast if you like it or not, because once you're in those extreme conditions and you find yourself cold, tired, hungry, the wind blasting in your face, potential avalanche conditions, you'll know if it makes you excited or if it makes you terrorized very quickly. So hiring a guide, absolutely mandatory for the inexperienced. And now the quote that I told you I was going to share about Julian Sands, one of the most powerful things I've read. I've read dozens and dozens of articles and watched a lot of videos about Mr. Sands. And he spoke of his fondness for nature. And in a 2020 interview with The Guardian, he was happiest when close to a mountain summit on a cold morning. And then in another interview that same year with Thrive Global, poignantly, the interviewer asked him, did he remember the last time that he cried? And I think that's an amazing question that people probably don't ask enough or be asked often enough. And his answer was remarkable because it brought together not only his vulnerability and sensitivity as a human being, but his love of the mountains. And the quote said this: "A few nights ago, I wept a little when I came off the end of the mountain trail, at the thought of being able to rest my feet and also the relief of having completed the trail. I love climbing mountains. I've spent a lot of time in the Alps over the years, a lot of time in the Andes, Alaska, and the American ranges. Climbing mountains, a lot of time people who don't climb mountains assume is about this great heroic sprint for the summit, and somehow this great ego-driven ambition. But actually, it's the reverse. It's about supplication and sacrifice and humility. When you go to these mountains, it's not so much a celebration of oneself, but the eradication of one's self-consciousness. And so on those walks, you lose yourself. You become a vessel of energy in harmony, hopefully with your environment. So when that came to an end a couple of days ago, I cried myself a tear of relief. My condolences to the family of this incredible man, talented, passionate man that I sure wish I had had an opportunity to go on a hike with myself, and an even more remarkable yet sad, and for the family tragic story. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please take a moment to subscribe, and also do somebody a good deed today. Don't ask for anything in return. Make the world a better place one step at a time. Thank you, my friends.